For more on all of this, let's now bring in former U.S. Army intelligence officer Michael Pregent and national security expert Raymond White. Gentlemen, good morning. Michael, I'm going to start with you. Do we have Michael with us this morning? Raymond, Michael, all right, we're going to start with you. So let's start with the blockade of Iranian ports. Iran now threatening to halt shipping in the Red Sea, the Persian Gulf, and the Gulf of Oman, calling the blockade illegal. Michael, what exactly do you make of this? Again, we just heard from our reporter. It's a very fluid situation. We're hearing different reports coming out of it. What are you making of what we're seeing in the Strait right now?
Well, what I'm seeing is a successful U.S. blockade of all Iranian ports. We are seeing traffic come out from ports not associated with Iran. And we are seeing traffic move through the Strait of Hormuz. But right now, I think the count is 10 vessels have been turned around that were leaving Iranian ports. All complied with the U.S. Navy warning that they would not be able to transit the Strait of Hormuz. We have to look at how this is impacting Iran. They have about 22 days left before they have to shut down their oil production because their pipelines are getting full, their storage facilities are getting full, they can't get the oil out. So this is going to have an impact. So if there is an extension, I think that will actually play into the U.S. favor.
Interesting. Yeah, we're definitely keeping an eye on that. Again, as our reporter Philip just said, Iran really does believe a couple ships are kind of seeping through that blockade. Raymond, to you now. So the U.S. and Iran will likely be returning to Pakistan possibly next week for a second round of those peace negotiations. Obviously, nothing really solid came out of that first round that involved J.D. Vance. What do you think? Do you think this war is nearly over? You know, of course, as we heard President Trump say the other day, it was quote unquote over.
Alex, Michael, good morning. Thanks for having me back. Yeah, I think we're reaching a pivotal part of the negotiations. I think President Trump mentioned already that the military campaign was winding down, other than most of the strategic targets have been taken out. I think what we probably will be looking at over the next week or so is diplomacy taking the center stage, which essentially is the space that President Trump operates in, negotiating. Iran is hell-bent on preserving the regime. They're hell-bent on having U.S. lift sanctions. They have 70% inflation. It's actually 1.3 million rials to the U.S. dollar, if you can imagine. And most importantly, they're looking at preserving their influence in the region. One last outstanding item that Iran is pursuing is to ride out the clock. They know that 30 years of experience negotiating, they can ride out the clock. So it's important that the U.S. holds their feet to the fire, which we're doing by combining sanctions, naval blockades, a U.S. military buildup with negotiations. So there's competing pressures taking place at this moment, and the next week or so will be very interesting to watch play out.
Yeah, that is certainly correct. Before we move on, Michael, I do want to ask you, so Philip Crowther, he kind of broke down exactly kind of the three major topics that are kind of sticking points for both sides. And one of them coming from Iran is they want, quote unquote, compensation, or some people are calling it reparations for the damage that has been done. Is that a non-starter? Is that even possibly something that the U.S. would even consider?
Well, I hope not, but there's always Qatar. Qatar's always willing to finance this regime. But for Iran to ask Gulf allies, U.S. Gulf allies, to pay, basically float Iran's economy again after what Iran did to their ports, after Iran attacked every one of their allies. We have to remember that both Qatar and Oman were negotiating on behalf of the regime, and they received ballistic missile strikes and drone strikes. So for Iran to ask its neighbors that it attacked to pay Iran for the damage done by the United States is ridiculous.
Yeah, when you put it that way, it's almost laughable. Raymond, so other countries we've got to talk about, of course, that is Lebanon and Israel. So you've got President Trump posting on Truth Social last night, quote, trying to get a little breathing room between Israel and Lebanon. It has been a long time since the two leaders have spoken, like 34 years. It will happen tomorrow. What do you expect to come out of these talks? I mean, do you think Israel can really come to an agreement if Lebanon won't budge, specifically on Hezbollah?
Yeah, that's a great question, Alex. What we're looking at right now is geopolitical chess, essentially. So China is involved in this. Iran clearly is involved in this. Israel and Hezbollah, or rather Israel and Lebanon, a peace deal would be ideal. But frankly, Iran pulls the strings on Hezbollah, not the government of Lebanon. So therefore, anything that's going to take place between Israel and Lebanon concerns Iran. And of course, that means China as well, because as we saw yesterday, the foreign minister of China contacted the foreign minister of Iran, and it's the dawn of a new day. Actually, I believe China blinked yesterday. The blockade has stopped 18% of their Brent crude oil from coming to them, and they're the ones that really control what Iran is going to be doing moving forward. So I think the U.S. is entering into a good position. Assuming that things play out over the next week in Pakistan, I would assume that you'd see some peace starting to take place between Israel and Lebanon in terms of Hezbollah's activities.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up China, because we certainly cannot forget that they're also a player in this as well. Gentlemen, Michael Friedgen, Raymond White, fantastic discussion this morning. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Alan.
All right, coming up.